Hello viewers, welcome to this channel. In the coming episodes, we are going to see what are the factors that affect individual behavior in organizations. In the introduction itself, we had a brief introduction about this various factors. So we are going to study in detail each factor. How does it affect individual behavior within the organizational context? So the very first individual factor is perception. In this video, we are going to see how perception affects individual behavior. Again, what is the process of perception? Or else, what are the factors which affects perception itself? And we will also discuss and explain how shortcuts people use in judging others sometimes assist them, sometimes distorts them. Shortcuts distorting or assisting in judging others. Finally, the application areas of this perception in organizational behavior. Before going in depth, we will have a definition for perception. So, perception can be defined as a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. Human brain, like computers, they get information, inputs in the process, in the form of sensory impressions. How do we interpret these sensory impressions? Vary from individual to individual. The reality is same, but how do we see that reality is different? Again, perception is a person's view of reality, and there may be a difference between how one person perceives the same reality and another person perceives the same reality. Reality is same. But how do we perceive the reality is different from individual to individual. And our behavior is going to be based on our own perception about the reality. Suppose if we perceive someone as lovable, decent, with good manners, you'll be moving close to him. We will try to make friendship. That is the behavior. Because based on our perception about the person, we behave. On the contrary, if we perceive someone as something bad, cunning, we try to avoid friendship with him or her. The behavior. the behavior is the result of our perception about that person. But if all of us perceive in the same way, there will not be any issue. But people perceive differently. That is the whole issue. Reality is same, but how do we perceive the reality is different from individual to individual. That is why the behavior, the resultant behavior also is different from individual to individual. In this context, I would like to show some pictures and show you how these pictures are interpreted differently by different people. Realism. For example, I show this picture. Some people may perceive this as old lady. Someone may perceive this as young lady. This is a famous experiment we do class. Some people may perceive it as a young lady. Same picture. Some people may perceive it as a old lady. This is another version of the same picture. Same picture, another version. Why? Whereas the reality same, someone perceive it as the picture of a young lady, someone perceive it as a picture of the old lady. Okay. Again, another picture. You see, there are two circles at the center, but one circle seems to be bigger, whereas in actual, both the circles at the center are of same size. Why do we get this illusion? The perception is different between these two circles. Though they are the same size, one circle at the center we perceive it smaller than the other one which is at the center of the another circle. Why do we perceive like this? This we will explain because of the association. This we will explain later. Again, the two lines. Both the lines are center line are of same length. But one line we perceive it to be longer than the other one. This is again an illusionary error. Illusionary error. Another example. Again the lines indicate both are of the same level. But the top line indicates it is farther from us. Again an illusionary effect. What we want to mean is reality same, but how do we interpret the reality is different. This is another picture. Those who take white as background in this picture interprets the picture as a flower vase, whereas those who take black as the background interpret the picture as the representation of two faces. The background creates the confusion or plays the role in distorting our perception about the picture. The background in which we see the picture distorts the perception about the picture. How do we perceive things? As we have already discussed, perception is the process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to the environment, to their environment. How do we get these sensory impressions? In the form of 5 senses. We get all the inputs. Our brain is like a computer. As the computer gets input in the form of data, we get input in the form of impressions, sensory impressions. But how do we get the sensory impressions and give meaning to the input is different from individual to individual. First, our brain, whenever the input comes, it makes the comparison between the existing knowledge. It recovers and try to categorize the input. I used to conduct this experiment. I asked students to close the eyes and I will give my spectacles. With the closed eyes, they have to find out the object by just touching. Without seeing, they were able to say this is the spectacle or pen. How does it happen? Because this is already registered in our brain. We cannot make any meaning without comparison. If it is new, then we will make it in the brain. Next time, when we see the same thing, we try to analyze, compare, and then give meaning. That is why sometimes unknown smell we are not able to recognize, because it is not registered in our brain. So perception is nothing but how we are giving meaning to our sensory impressions. It's a complex cognitive process. Cognitive process means it is connected with our brain. The complex cognitive process. Why do we say complex? Because people give meaning differently to the same reality. Reality same, but how do you interpret is different. That is the whole issue. If all of us uniformly interpret in the same way the reality, then there will not be any confusion or conflicts. All the conflicts are the result of our perception, individual perception. Like many individual factors, perception affects individual behavior in organizations, because we are going to behave as we perceive. So, what are the factors which determine perception now? That is what we call the process of perception. What are the factors which influence perception? There are mainly 3. One is the person, the perceiver himself. Second one is the object that is being perceived. Third one is the situation, setting, time setting, social setting in which the perception is being done. So 3, mainly the perceiver, the object that is being perceived, and the situation, time and place in which the perception happens. All these influences perception. That is how we are going to see. Now, what are the factors in the perceiver? Number one is attitude, motives, interest, experience, expectation, learning, personality. All these individual factors affect individuals' perception. These are the factors in the perceiver. Attitude. Your attitude affects your perception. For example, if your attitude towards a political party is positive, then even if that party is doing some corruption, still you admire. Because your attitude, you have developed a positive attitude towards that leader or a party, even though you don't agree that the party is corrupt, because you don't want to change your attitude. There will be a cognitive dissonance that we will discuss later in attitude. Then motive. Motives affect perception. In one experiment, it was conducted. People were not given food. They were made to be hungry, remain hungry. After sometimes they were shown some objects. Everybody perceived the object as food because they are motivated to take food. Everything they see it as food. Even the blurred image, they interpreted as something food. Because the motivation, they are all in motivated state. Again, interest, experience, expectation, what we have learned, all this. We see what we are interested to see. Even in a newspaper, not all the advertisements attract us. We see, but we don't see, actually. Because we are not interested. So we don't perceive it. All the advertisements that are appearing in newspapers, we don't perceive them. We see, but still we don't perceive. We don't understand. We don't give meaning. Because we are not interested. Again, we see what we are experienced to see. We see what we expect to see. We see what we have learned to see. All these individual factors affect perception. There is a famous proverb in Tamil. Kallai kanda naya kaanum, naya kanda kallai kaanum. The translation is, if you see a dog, there is no stone. If you see a stone, there is no dog. Assume there is a stone, sculpture, art, stone art. The figure of a dog. It has been beautifully carved as though it is looking like a real dog. For a person with artistic eye, he sees it as it is a real dog. He appreciates it as a real dog. There is no stone. For him, it is not a stone, it is a dog, real dog. For a person without artistic interest, eyes, it will be just like a stone. He is not able to appreciate the art. Or we can give another example. For a believer, the statue is a God. Because he is a believer, his attitude, interest. He is a believer of God. For him, the statue is the representation, God representation. So he adores it. He respects it. But for a non-believer, an atheist, it's not a God, it is a stone for him. As far as he is concerned, it is only a stone. As a result, he doesn't respect. Because perception influences your behavior. Here again, because the devotee perceives it as a God, he respects it. The non-believer perceives it as a stone, he doesn't respect it. So the behavior is influenced by perception, individual perception, individual factor. Then what are the factors in the object or target that is being perceived? That also influences your perception. For example, novelty, motion, sound, size, background, proximity, intensity, repetition. All these influence your perception about the object. Novelty, something new. You remember. Because it is new. That's why people will remember the first night, not the subsequent nights. People will remember the first day in the college, not the subsequent days. People will ever remember their first day in the job, office, not all the days, because of novelty. We perceive it. Again, motion, something which moves, it gets our attention. Sound gets our attention. That's why we shout. So that in order to get the attention, so that we are perceived. If we make sound, we will perceive it. Suddenly, somebody raises the sound and then asks, keep quiet. Perceived. Size. The crowd, someone who is more than 6 feet, 6.5 feet, he gets the attention. He is being perceived. Gets the attention. Someone who is a dwarf, again, size, gets the attention. Background, we study just now how background influences our perception. Proximity, two things which are closely happening. If they are happening distantly, we may not give meaning. If two friends are taking the same day leave from the office, we may say that both are going to a theatre. Because of the proximity. Both are taking leave at the same time. If they are taking leave differently, we may not perceive it. We understand it differently. Intensity, depth, color, sound intensity, voice intensity. Again, repetition. It influences perception. That's why everywhere they put repeatedly the road, danger, repeatedly no smoking. They put in many places, no smoking allowed. Repeatedly. In many places, they hang the board. The colleges, in many places, they hang. Ragging is prohibited. Many places, repeatedly. Because people will get attention, they will understand it, they will perceive it, and they will change their behavior. They also put what are the punishments for ragging. The same board. They display it throughout the college in many places, repetition, so that it will change the behavior of the students. Nobody will indulge in ragging. So all these are the factors which are in the object that is being perceived. It influences perception. Third one is factors in the situation, context in which it is happening, perception is happening, time, work setting, social setting. Time is an important aspect. That is why normally in academic, morning first hour, all the faculty will fight to take, competition to take the first hour. Because students are fresh in mind. Some people may not even prefer first hour because people will come late, students will come late. Before lunch or after lunch, professors will not prefer because sometimes time, people will not give attention, perceive it what we say. Only if they perceive it, they can give meaning to whatever we say. But they are in a state of hungry before lunch. After lunch, different state. They are sleepy. Normally, because time affects your perception, your understanding, giving meaning to your input. Here the input in the classroom is whatever we deliver. They hear it, but they don't understand it. They don't give meaning to the input because they are in a state of either hunger or after meals. Time affects your perception. Then work setting, social setting. How work setting affects, how social setting affects. For example, in the factory, everybody go to the factory with a uniform. If someone come to the factory, is coming to the factory in a colored dress, he will get the attention. Everybody will ask, what happened to you? Why? Why this particular person is getting attention and being perceived? Not everybody, because all are in the uniform. This person alone is directly coming from some social function, maybe marriage. The same example I give in another way. You are going to attend a marriage, wedding. All the colleagues are going to attend a wedding, marriage function of your colleague. Fortunately or unfortunately, you don't have time to go and change your dress from home. So you go along with your uniform, office uniform. Then again, there everybody will see you, perceive you, give attention to you. Why these people are in uniform? Oh, they are coming directly from the office. They are colleagues. Setup is different. Work setting is different. Social setting is different. People perceive it because they are not in tune with others. So again, the situation affects the perception. Situation affects the way in which we are being perceived, the way in which we are getting the attention. Because that is the first step. To get perceived, we should get the attention. Then only we can give meaning to the input. So these three factors influence perception. One is the perceiver, factors associated with the perceiver, factors associated with the object that is being perceived. Third one is the factors associated with situation, time setting, social setting, work setting. All these influence your perception. Perception is nothing but giving meaning to our sensory impressions. How do we interpret and give meaning to the all inputs which come through our senses. That is what perception. But perception is one of the important factor in determining individual behavior because we behave as we perceive. That is why we discuss this in organizational behavior. In individual behavior depends upon the individual perception. Next, what are the areas of application? One is this perception plays a role in judging others. Normally, when we judge others, we don't do it in a complete analytical manner because we don't have time. Sometimes what we do, we make shortcuts. But the problem is, sometimes these shortcuts in judging others help sometimes, but sometimes it distort the real picture. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it distorts. Not always correct. Shortcuts are not always correct. For example, the one shortcut which we use in judging others is selective perception. Selective perception, I have already told. We see so many advertisements in the newspaper, but we don't see it all. We don't give meaning to all the advertisements. Selectively we take. That is called selective perception. Whatever we are interested, those advertisements, those aspects only get our attention. Again, if we are doing this selective approach in judging others, again we are doing a mistake. Then again, halo effect. What is halo effect? Trying to judge somebody with a single characteristic. Single characteristic. Somebody is neatly dressed, then he will be a decent. No, you cannot say. Or someone education, single characteristic. With education, highly educated, he will not be cunning. You cannot assume. Many of the scandals are done by educated people. The recent scandals. Educated people, they do these unethical acts. So you cannot say someone is educated, so you will not do. Your single characteristic cannot distort your judgment about others. Then contrast effect. We discussed how in contrast we perceive it differently. The same circle, we perceive it, one is bigger than the other. In contrast. Then projection. This is another pitfall in making shortcut about others. Projection. What is projection? We want to project ourselves on somebody else. Suppose if we are hardworking, we like somebody who is hardworking. We don't agree that there are individual differences. Whatever characteristics, qualities we have or we appreciate, we expect them in somebody else. On that basis, we judge. That is projecting ourselves on somebody else. That is why in interview, someone is interested in the same thing in which the interviewer is interested. Then he will get more rating because of the projection. I like this, you also like this. That is also wrong. We should accept there are individual differences. I cannot expect everybody like me. I cannot project myself on somebody else and try to judge them. If I do that, that is a judgmental error. I cannot project my qualities on somebody else. He is a different person. Each one is different. So we have to judge each individual as it is. Then stereotyping. This is another major issue in judging others. We try to categorize people, put people in group, and then try to judge. Like all politicians are corrupt. All policemen are corrupt. Okay. All women are weak. No, it can't be. There are honest politicians also. Very few, of course. Not even less than 1 or 2%. There are honest policemen also. Very few. You cannot generalize, stereotype. Then again it is another perceptual error in judging others. We see a lot of advertisements showing women in stereotype role. They wash cloth, cook. Nowadays, everybody is taking part in cooking. Everybody is taking part in household work, but still the age-old stereotyped role of a woman. She is only shown as someone who is washing the cloth. Why? This is again stereotype. We have to change this stereotype judgments. That is again another pitfall in judging others. Coming to application areas of this concept of perception in organizational behavior. For example, of course, every individual behavior is influenced by perception. There is no doubt about it. Perception is one of the important factors which influences individual behavior. Apart from that, what are the areas in which the perception concept is finding application? One is employment interview. Because in the interview selection process, selection is going to be made based on the perception. Correct or not? Selection of a candidate is going to be made based on the perception, not the reality. Perception of the person. That is why normally in interview panels they will be having 3 or 5 members, because nobody should do this by mistake, even by mistake, or we are prone to do it judgment error. We are prone to do this judgmental error. That's why we always have 3 or 5 members, so that uniformly when combined together the judgment will be more or less equal to the reality. That is, single person interview will be very, very wrong because of the judgmental error. If 3 people are doing individually, differently, and then overall judgment will be more or less nearer to the reality. Then again, performance evaluation. During the time of performance evaluation, perception is going to play a role, because even if you have done a good work, the boss must perceive it. You know you have done a good work, positive, but boss perception is different. Yesterday, last episode, we discussed how people are afraid of this performance evaluation during the time of work at home, because people are not being observed. So what they are doing actually may not be visible. As a result, evaluation, though they have done good work, because people are not able to see them, the evaluation may be less. So performance evaluation is based on the perception. Then employee effort. Same effort. Someone is putting very hard worker, works all the time for the organization. Unfortunately, he is also a worker, union member. Management perceives him as someone who is an asset to the organization. Same person, because he is putting extra effort. He is doing more hard work. All the time he is devoting to the organization. So the organization, management considers him as someone as an asset. Whereas the union may consider him as someone who is loyal to the management. Same person. Because he is doing extra, there is no need. As a result, this particular person effort may be viewed differently by management as well as union, because both see from different perspective. So again, this is another area where perception plays the role in organization behavior. So perception is one of the important individual factor in determining individual behavior. What are the other factors which determines individual behavior in organizations? You will see in the next episode. Till then, thank you for your patient listening. Thank you all.